This conference will now be recorded.
So it's 10:05 now. I just sent an email to Chris and Todd to see if they would be joining us. But so far we only have Charles and Linda.
Yeah, I'm calling Todd on the phone. I mean, Chris,
Okay.
sorry.
I'm gonna try calling Todd and Chris as well.
Yeah, I tried Todd. Sorry, Chris. I keep saying that. Yeah, about all I got was voicemail. I know with the power being out down there, I saw an email from him earlier this morning that said he was really busy getting his guests in order and getting ready for some more. So it may, in the hubbub of things, it may have slipped his mind.
Okay.
So you're going to call Todd?
Yes, I'll call Todd. One moment.
Okay, thanks. Bye. All right, Chris is going to sign on here in a minute.
I was able to reach Todd. He's going to hop on here in just a moment.
And I did get Chris, and he's joining as well.
Okay, great. And I know Margaret again said she would not be able to make it this morning.
Okay.
So we'll wait for those two and then we can go ahead and get started.
All right, looks like Chris is coming.
Sorry, you guys. What a crazy 24 hours it's been.
Sounds like it.
Man.
I'm here in North Carolina, so I've missed on all the excitement. But
Yeah, so we had a full house and then no power for 25 hours. So a lot of upset guests. So anyway, dealing with that.
you know, it's like life on the coast sometimes.
Man, that's for sure.
And now
All
they
right,
can
well,
turn to the inferno.
Yeah, they didn't bargain for 80-degree heat and smoke and 100-mile-per-hour winds. And yeah, but yeah, that's kind of how it goes.
Well, the fires right now are the worst thing. Clackamas County and Jackson County, over by Mount Hood. They're just actively burning up the state.
all right, well, we have a quorum.
People are being evacuated.
So if everybody agrees, we could go ahead and get started. So I'll call the meeting to order. I'm Charles Dice, Chairman of the Southwest Coastal Citizens Advisory Committee. If each of the other members could identify yourselves.
Linda Eierman, I'm from Arch Cape.
Chris Anderson from Arch Cape.
Ian?
It looks like we have Todd as well. Todd, do you have audio working? Well, for the record, Todd Lundy is present, working on getting audio connected. This is Ian Sisson, planning staff.
Julia Decker, planning staff.
All right, great. So the first action of business really is to review the meeting summaries from July the 8th and August the 12th. We did review the July one briefly at our last meeting, but there was a request for a modification, which staff has now made. So given that update, I'd like to move that we adopt or approve the minutes for the July the 8th meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, great. So that passes. So now we could review the minutes from the last meeting, which was on August the 12th. And I have no suggestions or comments on the minutes, so they looked okay to me.
Move they be adopted as drafted.
I'd second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So again, that's approved. So Ian, again, we've got this public comment and input section, and once again, I've forgotten why that's at the beginning of the meeting, but I'm going to let you sort of shepherd that along.
Sure. So again, we had slotted this public comment opportunity into the agendas for all of the advisory committees in case there were any members of the public who were in attendance that wanted to raise any issues or questions before the group jumps into the discussion on the topics of the day. So if anyone,
I'll be back from California.
If anyone attending had any questions or comments for the group, please go ahead and ask them now. Nancy, Chase, did you have anything? Hearing nothing there, did anyone else wish to take themselves off mute? And I see Guido Paparoni.
Yeah, I'm fine for the time being, Mr. Season. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else? If you have a question or comment, go ahead and take yourself off mute. Okay, Charles, I don't see anyone coming off mute.
All right, well, then we could move into the review of the Goal 5 topic. And again, just to sort of recap, but I'm sure everybody has read their emails from Gail or Ian and are aware that the county planning staff has recommended a new structure for reviewing the various topics of Goal 5. And today, and this goes out for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months to cover all of the topics in Goal 5. So September's 2 topics per that revised schedule were to be cultural and historic. So with that in mind, I really had only one comment to make on the cultural and historic resources portion from my perspective. And I should have sent out an email, but I've been involved in some family activities on the East Coast and just ran out of time. But the one thing that I would like to see is that in Cove Beach, we have a lake called Cove Beach Lake. And I think that got overlooked back in the late 70s when all of the planning activity and was initiated surrounding these new 18 goals that were hatched by the state. And in talking to various people, you know, in the early 2000s about why this might have happened, the feedback I got was, well, the county really started with a lot of activity up in Astoria and along the Columbia River and kind of moved down the county as time and money allowed, and they really sort of ran out of money when they got down to about Seaside for any kind of formal study or investigation. In any event, Cove Beach Lake is a lake, freshwater lake, one of the, as far as I know, the closest to the Pacific Ocean in the state. It also has some historical connection to the Indians. The Indians did camp there and live along the edge of the lake. There are Indian middens around the lake. So I would certainly like to see that included in our updated resource list for cultural and/or historic sites.
Charles, you are off camera.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, now you're back. Okay, thank you. Well, I'm a little confused on what inventory things belong on, because I realize Ocola State Park shows up on this cultural and historic, but as a rule, they seem to be, I mean, the categories are building, structure, object, site, and district. So I didn't think of proposing anything nature in this group, but you say this also might also have, Cove Beach Lake might also have cultural significance. So is that the distinction? We put something natural in here if it also has historic or cultural significance?
Yeah, well, I'm really with you. I also, you know, in reading through all the various attachments for Goal 5 and sitting through the presentations on historic and cultural sites. I thought I knew what it meant before I started wading through all the material, and now I'm confused as I think you are. So I'm just suggesting that there is a site in Cove Beach that has both natural significance and historical significance and cultural significance, and exactly which list or perhaps multiple lists it should show up on. I'll look to planning to help, figure that out, but I would just like it on one list or more.
I'm not aware of any reason a certain site couldn't be listed on multiple inventories. Julia, if you wanted to correct me if you're aware of something, but up here on the screen, I have the state guidance for evaluating and determining significance. And so if your group agrees that Cove Beach Lake meets the criteria for determining something to be culturally or historically significant, then that is something we can add for consideration to be added to the inventory.
So the inventory is just a list of possibles. And then if they're determined to be significant, then they become accepted. Is that right?
Right. So the inventory process, the first step is to collect information about potential resource sites.
So I would be for music or golf.
We've got some background noise.
Hey, Chris, Chris, you want to hit mute if you're going to be on?
I think that's coming from Linda's screen, actually.
Oh, sorry.
I'm just going to mute Linda here for a moment. Looks
Sounded
like,
like a
sorry
guy's
about that.
voice.
She's back.
Okay.
Okay. So again, the inventory process, the first step would be to collect information about potential resource sites, then basically vet that information. If there's not adequate information available, then the site should not be included in the inventory. Then we go through this evaluation of whether the resource is significant, meeting these criteria highlighted under item number 2. And then whichever sites are determined to be significant would then go through the adoption process to be formally listed in the inventory. So certainly you could make a suggestion that the lake should be considered for significance.
Yes, and I so do.
Fine, that's all right. I'm good with that.
Yeah,
Potential site, both for historic and natural resources.
there are 2 other sites that might be considered. I didn't see the tunnel listed as one, and that would seem to be a rather obvious one.
Yeah, yes, Todd, it is listed.
It is listed. Okay, good. And the other one that I didn't see was the blasted out rocks at is it Cove Beach, where they blasted out the rocks to make access to Arch Cape and South
Hug Point.
Hug Point.
Hug Point. Hug Point. With wagon ruts in the rocks and so on, it seemed to me that was a sort of a important phase of development of the coast, access to the coast.
And I would agree. Linda, you support that?
Oh, yeah.
Chris?
I think that is actually Hug Point. That is the point.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, I'm on board with that too, for sure.
Okay, good. And as Todd was thinking, well, I mean, was making his comments, it also dawned on me, there's another place just inland from Arcadia Beach. There's a stand of old growth trees, and there's one tree in particular that actually has a name, and it escapes me. But perhaps one of the other folks can recall the name of that. And then the little area has a name too. I know Mike Manzulli knows what it is, but I it's gone out of my head. So if somebody else wanted to chime in with, they know the answer.
I don't know what it is.
Linda, do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't.
It's by Arcadia?
Yeah, it's just, yes, it's by Arcadia. And if you recall, about a year or two ago, there was a developer that wanted to put in a RV park just across from Arcadia.
Yeah.
And a bunch of locals were sort of got up in arms and went up there on a Saturday morning to protest. And one of the reasons was because of this grove of old growth trees, as well as the fact that it is a nesting place for marbled murrelets. So, as I said, I don't really recall what happened with all of that activity, other than I know the RV park never went forward. But that glade does have a name, and I just raising it as a point. I don't know if it's something that needs to be listed, or if it's better to just, be silent about it. I was just raising it to see if anybody else wanted to make any comments. But if nobody knows about it, then we'll leave it alone.
Well, one thing I did notice reading through the materials is that it really depends on who the owner of these sites are, because the owner can actually decline to have it evaluated or have it listed. I guess they can't decline to have it evaluated, but they can certainly say no during the adoption process. Is that right, Ian?
Yes, correct.
Hi, this is Julia. I just wanted to ask if that particular site might be something to consider for the habitat and resources that will be coming up here in another couple of months. Just because it doesn't make it, maybe doesn't make it onto the cultural or historic site, perhaps due to the habitat considerations, it might make it onto a different list. I just throw that out there for your consideration.
Excuse me. No, it's a good suggestion, and I will, when I get back to Oregon, I'll call up Mike Manzulli and talk to him a little bit more about it, and maybe I'll revisit it at that time. All right, so everybody seems to have gone into mute mode, and I don't know exactly why that would be the case, but
Sorry, I'd placed Linda on mute because we were getting some background noise. Sounded like some ice being scooped or something like that.
okay. All right. So any other thoughts on this topic of today for historic and cultural resources? Either comments on the existing Clatsop County Comprehensive Plan policies for the county, or comments on, other sites perhaps in the county that never made it to the list that people on this, on this committee would know about and think should be on the list.
Are the gun emplacements up at Fort Stevens on the list? They must be. I didn't see them.
Yeah, I certainly don't know the answer to that, but I'll defer to Ian and Julia.
I don't see it on the on our Goal 5 list. My guess is because it's within the city of Warrenton, and so that would have been left out of the county's inventory.
Well, is Fort Clatsop a federal site or a state site or a county site?
The answer is yes.
Okay.
It is a bi-state memorial and a federal site. It's a federal memorial, so it is a national monument, but also a bi-state park.
So as such, it may not make any sense to have it listed. It's already going to be preserved.
I would guess that it's well protected, but it's certainly worthy of being listed if we want to make sure that it's something that people are aware of when they're making planning decisions, just so that it's there and it bounces up into view. Just if you're doing any kind of work in an area, just yes, it's well protected, but doesn't mean it shouldn't be on this list.
Well, I'd certainly propose we add it to the list then. I mean, through the process, we'll have plenty of time to take it off if it's not appropriate, but better safe than sorry, I say.
Todd, could you restate which resource you were referring to? I thought I heard you say Fort Stevens.
Fort Stevens gun emplacements from, gosh, I don't even know which war it was.
Civil.
Oh, is it Civil War?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Julia.
So hearing no other thoughts, I was a little confused on the cultural resources. So now I'm reading off of the landscape, formatted Goal 5 policies. And there's one under cultural resources, policy number 1. And in the recommended changes, it says that the Clatsop Plains CAC has previously provided a recommended change to the policy, and there's some to essentially change the wording from Indian sites to be more specific about the Chinook Indian Nation. And I'm not that familiar with the Indian organization in the northwest portion of Clatsop County, but if that's more restrictive than just saying Native Indian, I'd rather be more inclusive and less restrictive myself.
Yeah, I would agree. If that's necessary.
So I do know we recently added a couple members to the Coastal Plains Citizen Advisory Committee representing the Chinook Indian Nation. I'm not sure exactly how the recommendation came about, but I would, coming from that group, I would assume that was one of those appointees' recommendations. Julia, did you have any more context on that recommendation?
No, that was basically what I was going to say was that was a member of that tribe who made that recommendation. That's what I know about.
Okay, well, as I said, I was on another phone call in the last week or so. I've forgotten which one it was, but there was a representative there from the Chinook Nation, and it had something to do with the county, so maybe one of you guys was also on it. But anyway, he was making a fairly strenuous point that anything that it deals with Native Indians in Clatsop County should be under the umbrella of the Chinook Nation. So as long as that's, a true statement, and all of the other tribes have been or would be included under that, then that's fine. I'm just a little, I'm just a little nervous about accepting that as face value. And if there were some other tribe that had, sites that needed to be preserved, I'd sure like to make sure that, as I said, we're inclusive and not restrictive.
May I be allowed to make a comment? This is Mary Jo Mosby.
Yeah, fine with me, I guess.
The only comment I have is I do know of some contacts I can send you from the Clatsop Nehalem Confederated Tribes.
Clatsop Nehalem Confederated Tribes.
They are part of the Chinook, but they stepped away from the Chinook, but that information is at least 2 or 3 years old, so I don't know if that's still current.
Okay, that would be great. If you could send it to Ian and copy myself, or send it to me and I'll forward it to Ian, either way.
All right, I'll do that. Thank you.
So Ian, maybe, we can just note that, for that particular policy one on the cultural resources, that at least our committee would like to make sure it's inclusive. And as we go along and maybe get more information to clarify it, we'll revisit it. But for the moment, I'd like the record to reflect that we want it to be inclusive of all tribes.
Okay, Charles, I've got that down.
So are we going to go through these policies? Is this what we're going to do here?
Yeah, I think that'd be a good idea. So we could start with policy 1, which really is, focused on Ecola Park. Again, I kind of read through it, and I didn't have anything useful to comment, because I'm sure the people in Cannon Beach are all over this one, and I don't have anything to add.
Well, there already is a master plan. If it needs to be updated, that's not, I don't think, our job to do. So the policy is a little out of date. But it could just be reworded if it needs to be kept, because there is a plan. It's fine. The Clatsop Plains suggestion seems fine.
Yeah, so Ian, you got any, I mean, there was another policy that staff had already commented that it ought to be removed because it was something that had already been done. So is this one that falls into that category, or I'm not familiar?
I don't think there was a recommendation to remove policy 1, but to augment it to state that the Clatsop tribe of the Chinook Nation wanted some specific information regarding the historic activities there, which were harvesting seafood, cedar, and spruce. So I've got the comments up on the share screen here showing that language, which again, I think is just supposed to be more specific than the current language we have.
Well, but you also went to the trouble to make the comment that the plan was adopted in 75 and has not been updated. So it kind of leaves the question hanging that I think Linda was suggesting about, okay, maybe it should be updated.
Who does that?
So the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department would be the lead on a project to update a state park master plan. And so we would presumably be involved in that process, at least by invitation, to provide input. I don't know that we could direct or recommend the Parks and Recreation Department to update that master plan, but you could suggest something along those lines.
Well, I don't think we know if it needs to be updated. You know, it's just kind of outside of the scope of what we're doing. That is simply a comment on my part. I would leave it to those who are familiar with the plan to say whether it needs an update.
Yeah, I personally, I would agree. I know nothing about the plan, but it's just reading the note makes me scratch my head and say, okay, well, fine. Should it be updated? But I don't know.
Well, I think one reason, so I didn't personally draft the language that's in the notes there, but I think the year is important because of the time the comprehensive plan, the county comprehensive plan was devised and adopted, which was after the date of the Ecola State Park Master Plan. So just to note that since the original county comprehensive plan was adopted, it appears there have been no changes to that master plan for Ecola Park.
I would just say it seems like it's a good goal for the State Parks Division to give recognition to the historic activities. So I would be in favor of retaining the goal, perhaps in a reworded form.
And how would you suggest rewording it, Linda?
Oh, just recognizing that there already is a plan. You know, it suggests there isn't one here, so I don't know. It's not really. I just retain it.
All right, we'll retain it as it is, I guess. So policy 2, this is the one I guess I had in mind when I said I knew there was a staff note recommended deleting a goal. And I mean, it makes sense to me to delete it since the work's already been done.
Yes, and is the cannon on the inventory? I think it is.
I think so.
Yes.
I'd agree with deleting it.
I would as well.
And then policy 3, it's again one of those that I don't know what to do with. Because I know nothing about it. I don't know. I'm not familiar with the Lindgren House, but you know, if the county continues to maintain it, then great. Whether we need to carry it as a policy or not, I don't know, but can't hurt, I suppose.
You know, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, these policies in the old comprehensive plan read like a series of special interest groups. You know, somebody cared about one thing and so they included it. There isn't really much aspirational in here, or, you know, overarching policies. There is certainly a process.
Well, so if the Lindgren house shows up on the inventory list, and I'm fumbling with my papers here, but I think I remember seeing it on the inventory list. So if it appears on the inventory list, is there really any point to having it as a policy anymore, or is it just all? I mean, what's the distinction between being on an inventory list versus being stated in a policy?
I would just suggest one explanation is that the Lindgren house in particular is unique because it is ownership of the house and responsibility for maintenance is bestowed on the county versus something that's in private hands or owned and operated by some other agency.
Okay, well, I wouldn't want to alienate anybody who's, you know, devoted to this. So if, I think our question is not, it's just, do these things belong in the comprehensive plan? Not the question of, are these valuable things? Does it belong in the comprehensive plan? If it does, leave it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Lindgren House is listed in the it is listed in the inventory.
I mean, I don't think any of us have a substantive objection to it. So
I agree. We'll leave it. Same thing, I suppose, for policy 4. So Ian, maybe, so these, you said you didn't prepare the staff notes. So are these staff notes like historical from the dark ages, or is this something you or Julia added that's specific to our current comprehensive plan update?
So I think that the notes were put together by Gail. We've kind of divvied up each of the Goal 5 resource buckets among different staff. So I know Gail is kind of the owner of the historic and cultural areas topic. So I believe she put those comments together.
Okay.
yeah, it seems like if this has already been done, it could be deleted since it's been here since 1980. If it hasn't been done, I guess the question is it necessary 40 years later that they haven't done it?
I'd agree. We should delete it.
Well, I would say, yeah, I guess that's true.
Are we on policy 3 or 4?
4.
Yeah, 4,
okay.
I think. Although, quite frankly, it seems to apply to 3 as well. But
Yeah, it does.
So I guess I guess from the, if I could summarize, from the committee standpoint, it seems like we're kind of questioning why these still sit here. On the other hand, if it's important to the county and to the comprehensive plan for the county at large, then I don't think we certainly have any objections to maintaining them. It's more a question of what makes sense from the planning department for the comprehensive plan at large.
I have a question. Do these same issues come out, or same policies come out to all the various CACs?
Yes.
Okay, so there will be other opinions.
Yeah.
No. And so I think we could probably speak fairly clearly about our opinion of what should happen to these. And it's ultimately going to be up to everybody else or somebody else to really make the decision. I would suggest we delete both 3 and 4. We recommend the deletion of both 3 and 4.
Well, I don't know. 2 and 4 seem like they have already been accomplished, so they're out, you know, where they're just not needed. 3, it sounds like it's an ongoing funding issue. So I wouldn't really want to delete that if it's needed in the comprehensive plan in order to have that funding continue.
Okay, very well.
I agree with that. And then 5, you know, I think using that same logic, and as the note also says, that policy is completed and should be removed. So I would think that's a logical thing to do.
So we're talking about 2, 4, and 5.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and probably 6 as well.
Look at 6.
And so on number 4, I just wanted to point out, it looks like we have contacted the Historical Society to find out whether policy 4 has been completed, but we have not received a reply yet.
Okay. We could make it conditional, it'd be deleted conditional on the fact whether it has been completed or not. If it's been completed, delete it. If not, retain it.
Yeah, I mean, these policies to me are really tactical actions, and it's, you know, that they've either been done or haven't been done. And as I said, if they are tactical items, then maybe they don't need to be on a policy list. When I see the word policy, I think more of conceptual ideas that we want to preserve, you know, specific things in specific areas, like preserving wetlands. That's certainly a policy. It isn't a tactical issue that's specific to the Lindgren House or, you know, the Falls Pulp Mill or whatever. So to me, once they're done, they probably ought to come off.
Yeah, I affirm.
I would just add in there that, you know, Linda brought up a good point about funding streams. And one reason it's important to have a plan in the first place is that having something in writing in an adopted plan really streamlines the ability to fund projects. So if it's something that's ongoing, it might be smart to retain if there's going to be a continued need as a long-term thing for funding, whether that be from grants or from a general budget. And then certainly if something has already been accomplished and is fully complete, then it would make sense to remove.
Yeah, that is good. Good point.
Okay, so retain 1 and 3, delete 2, 4, and 5, and now 6. Let's see.
Yeah, so again, for me, I, you know, if things are listed, are on the inventory list, In my mind anyway, and I'm no attorney, but in my mind, that means that there is a commitment from the county to protect those resources, whatever that word protect means. Um, and once it's on the list, then I think, if continued funding or renewed funding or new funding is necessary, then that should be, either self-evident or just a consequence of the fact that that resource is still on the list, and therefore, it needs to be preserved and maintained, and therefore the county needs to find the funding to do it.
This is
I
Julia. Could I
wanted
just jump in for a second and give you an example of something that has to do with the Morrison House, which is on the Clatsop Plains and is often referred to as the Tag Ranch. So this policy is one that staff used some years back when a cell tower company came along and wanted to place a cell tower up on the Clatsop Plains on the hill above that ranch. And it was one of the policies that staff used to make sure that the tower was a stealth tower. And we did not receive any pushback from the tower company. And part of the reason for that was just we had this in place to be able to say we are going to continue to protect the view shed on this hillside, which is part of the view shed of the Morrison House. And that was the Judge Morrison House on the old Tag Ranch, which is one of the earlier land donation claims from 1850 something. Anyway, that's an example of how it actually gets used. And I just wanted to give you that example.
Okay, great. That helps. I mean, certainly if these things are useful, then yeah, let's keep them. But as I said, I mean, it looks like some of them are very tactical and talking about things that should be done, and once they're done, it's questionable to me whether it makes sense to retain it. But if it makes sense, then yeah, retain it.
Julia, the list of these is extensive. And is there any responsibility for the county to maintain all of these items on the several page list that we have in our documents?
When you say maintain them, do you mean does the county provide funding for their maintenance?
Well, what does the county provide? What does the county provide for these items on this list?
Well, this list in itself is, I guess, what you might describe as moral support. Like I just described with the use of the list for maintaining the view shed for the Morrison House. In some instances, the county is responsible for something like the Lindgren House, so there's a financial obligation there. But a lot of the time, what the county is doing basically with these is providing moral support, but also giving them the visibility necessary for them to maintain their upkeep or continue their funding streams from elsewhere or something like that. I mean, it just kind of depends on what it is. And in some cases, it highlights them and it gets people to become more aware of the culture or the history. Everybody, I think, knows about the Tillamook Rock Lighthouse. People are maybe not if they're not from around here, may not realize the significance of the Clatsop Plains Cemetery or the church out there. And I would guess that most of you probably have never seen the Westport Log Tunnel. But and so that was another question that I had just kind of percolating. So as long as I'm, got the mic, I'll ask you, are there any kinds of sites such as that in South County that are not on this list? I mean, you talked about a couple of things, but what about cemeteries or things like that that did not make it onto the list that possibly should have?
Yeah, I know I did kind of rack my brain about what was in the South County that ought to be on the list, and the only two things I could think of I already spoke about. But I've only been there for 20 years, so I don't. Those are the only two I know about. I'm not aware of any cemeteries, or there's an old quarry down in our neck of the woods, but meaning Cove Beach, but I don't know that has any particular significance. And if it did, I'm sure we will get to talk about it when we get to quarries.
Is the Arch Cape Tunnel in Clatsop County?
Yes, and it's on the list.
Okay. The question I have about policy 6 is, why is it singling out just 4 things from the inventory that says the county will protect? I mean, isn't the county, by adopting it as a significant resource and having it on the sort of permanent list, isn't the county protecting all of those things? All of those resources?
Julia, do you have a good answer for that question?
No. I don't know why they picked out those. I guess I mean, sometimes what happens and I think you have some notes kind of buried deep in this agenda that are from the paperwork back in the 70s when they developed the first list, which was extensive, and then they winnowed it down and winnowed it down and winnowed it down. And so there might be some notes that explain how they came to decide what should have certain types of listings, but I have not pursued that, so I don't actually know.
Well, I would be in favor, oh, excuse me.
I had a follow-up question that maybe before you do that, Linda. Is there any reason that that our group of policies gives greater strength to these particular items than being on the list? In other words, if we take them off this policy list, does that diminish their status from where it is now?
I don't know that it diminishes their status. It certainly, being on that list helps with visibility. So I guess my question is, would you want to elevate other things onto the list? As I mentioned, it was really useful when I was doing a staff report trying to protect a view shed for a cell tower, so that the cell tower did not overwhelm the backdrop for and historical residents.
And
Well,
to add to that, sorry, Linda, we have
That's
up
all right.
on the screen, I'm sharing the section of code that is referred to in the staff notes for policy 6. So again, I still don't know the reason that those 4 sites were singled out, but that policy was implemented by a set of regulations in our standards document. So that was what implemented policy 6. And I think one thing your group could consider is if either this set of policies or a separate set of policies should apply to any other resources than just those 4. But the Morrison House, for example, is specifically listed here in this set of development standards.
Okay, well, I would be in favor of, this is an aspirational policy in the sense it's got the county protecting historical resources through appropriate ordinances. So it's a good policy, but I would be in favor of broadening it to include, you know, all of the resources that make it onto the adopted list should be protected through appropriate zoning ordinances. I don't myself see why, if it's important enough to be adopted as a cultural or historical resource, it shouldn't have the county's protection through ordinances.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree as well. And if we do that, if they were to do that, then these lists, these policies, which call out certain items, would not be necessary.
Right.
Or they should be inclusive of all the things listed.
Yeah, well, like I think Linda suggested that with their kind of overarching policy statement.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the list has gotten so long that it's kind of overwhelming, but there ought to be some ordinances that can be written that say, you know, for resources that have been adopted as our cultural and historical things, the following protections apply. So I would suggest retaining a policy of this character, but making it inclusive of all of the resources that have been adopted.
Yeah, good. And I think that's a pretty crisp statement, and I would agree with what Linda just said as something that would be worth capturing for the comprehensive plan update.
And Linda, would you then therefore recommend removal of those items which are specific to certain sites?
Yes, or else list them all, one or the other. You know, you're
Okay.
incorporating the list by reference.
It should be enough.
I mean, I'm a little confused because the list started out in 1980 as 11 things. And now it's, what is it, got 100 on it now or something? Am I reading the right thing?
I think we still only have 11 on the official inventory.
And does that include the Tillamook Lighthouse and the Morrison House and the Clatsop Plains Church and the Westport Log Tunnel?
Yes, here on the share
Okay.
screen is the list of 11 items.
Okay, well, yeah, I would, since only 11, I would just make it inclusive and not name any of them.
I agree.
I agree as well. Chris?
Agree.
Okay. Makes it unanimous. Okay, so policy 7. I read this a couple of times and I couldn't figure it out, so I thought maybe it would come to me, but it didn't. I'm still not sure I understand. I certainly understand that Clatsop County is going to work with the Clatsop County Historical Society and SHPO. But what they're going to do at the conclusion of working with them is a little bit unclear to me.
So I believe my understanding of that was that at the time this was originally written, there were a list of specific sites that were recommended by the advisory committees.
Right.
And the policy was to officially add those to the Goal 5 inventory, which would have been completed, but the policy could be retained during this process to be sure that any new items requested to be added to the inventory by your group or any of the other groups go through that process, and it would set a time frame to do that.
Well, so we don't know what happened to there was actually 9 that were recommended by the old Citizens Advisory Committee in 1980. And we don't know what's happened to the other 8 because one of them was part of the 11. And so, well, what is the long list of 60 that are those all just potential resources that? could be added to the list.
So Gail compiled the inventory of items that the state has listed, and which is 1,900 for all of Clatsop County, but only 60 of those 1,900 are in the unincorporated areas. All of the others are within city limits, so there wouldn't be any need to include those in the county's inventory. So basically what that's saying is there are 60 entries in the state's list that are in the unincorporated areas of Clatsop County, and currently we only have 11 items on the official Goal 5 inventory. So I think the suggestion I would infer from that is your group could look to that list of 60 to consider which of those should be added to the county's Goal 5 inventory.
And where do we
Okay.
find that list of 60?
That would be in the packet. I believe those are all pulled out here. If you can see on the share screen, I can't speed count, but I think that might be about 60 that are listed here. And then Gail had highlighted the ones that are already inventoried in green.
Ah, okay. I saw the list. It wasn't clear to me, though. I suppose when I saw the list, my assumption was those were all included in the comprehensive plan as historic resources or cemeteries or whatever. But now what I hear you saying is only the ones in green are included.
Correct. So you can see on the screen now under National Register places within Clatsop County, only 2 of those are adopted in the Goal 5 inventory, and the remaining dozen or so are not included in the county's Goal 5 inventory, but they're listed in the National Register.
Okay, well, here's how I would amend this policy. Keep the first 2 lines. So sites and buildings on the state of Oregon inventory or identified by the Citizens Advisory Committee. And then strike the last sentence about completing it in 2 years. So really, we're just saying the county agrees to work with those who care, the people in the Historic Society and whatever, to identify places, and they'll do it the way they're supposed to.
Yeah, so now I'm more confused than I was. Because I didn't print out that entire list, but I did print out a piece of it. And in the list that you showed a minute ago with the green highlighting, under Historic Resources, Clatsop County Comprehensive Plan Goal 5, it lists Ecola State Park, the Lindgren House, the Morrison House, the Clatsop Plains Memorial Church, the Clatsop Plains Cemetery, but none of them are highlighted. And yet,
yeah, I see how that could be confusing. So I think that last list is just a summary of all of the items that were highlighted above. So those are the 11.
Yes.
so you're saying that all of those in that section at the bottom of the page on your screen should have been highlighted. Is
Yeah,
that what
to
you're
my
saying?
knowledge, To my knowledge, all of the items that are on that list at the bottom are highlighted above. It's just a summary of the
Oh.
items that are highlighted above.
Okay. All right.
And so if I heard Linda's recommendation correctly, it would be that sites and buildings that are listed in the state and national register and sites that are recommended by the citizen advisory committees essentially would go through this formal inventory process. Is that correct?
Well, no, this is just saying the county will work with others, you know, to do it. So if nobody comes to you and there's no advocate for one of these cemeteries, then you don't have to worry about it. But it's just, I think policy 6 is saying how that you're going to protect the ones already on the list, and policy 7 is just saying what you're going to do if someone comes to you from the Historic Society or something and wants to put one of them on the list. That's how I think of it, the future and the past.
Okay.
You know, it's like, how do you get on the list? Is policy 7.
Right. I think another way to look at it too is the Oregon administrative rules for the inventorying process require us to go through a process basically to determine whether something that was recommended is significant. And so I think policy 7 is also stating that we would rely on partner agencies to go through that determination process, which may have more expertise in determining the significance of a resource.
You partner with them.
Right.
That's a good idea.
So now that I think I understand a bit more, I'd say policy 7 kind of makes more sense to me, and I would recommend we leave it the way it is.
Linda, are you suggesting the language for policy 6 then be changed to be more inclusive?
Policy 6, yes.
Yeah, I think we already did that and agreed that we would change that language to either reference the whole list or call everything out that's on the list, whichever way planning wants to do it.
We need to be very specific about which list we're talking about too in that policy. There are 2 lists, right?
The accepted list, the ones where the 11 that have been accepted.
Right, okay. I agree. The 11 that are accepted.
Then that leaves those earlier policies that were specific to certain sites that we were thinking about recommending deletion of. Going back a page, Ian, it was policy, what, 3? Deal with 2 and, or did we deal with 2 already? We did delete 2, didn't we?
Yeah, I think we dealt with everything.
Okay.
Up until policy 7.
Very well.
All right, so then the next thing would be the policy 1 under cultural resources.
Wait a minute. On 7, you said leave it as is, but I think it's limiting. I would at least take out that phrase identified by the Citizens Advisory Committee, because that's kind of limiting which resources they can look at. And I'd also take out the last sentence because this is referring to the Citizens Advisory Committee that was in existence 40 years ago. And it was giving them 2 years to get it done.
I certainly agree, both of those.
Well, the thing is though, I'm to me, this means what I think I heard you say it meant, Linda. And that is that as our current Citizens Advisory Committee or any of the other Citizens Advisory Committees come up with new things to add to the list, I think this policy says that the county is going to work with the Historical Society and SHPO to evaluate the historical significance of those new things that we bring up, and that the Goal 5 administrative evaluation process will be applied, which we talked about earlier. And then the county will take appropriate action to protect any sites that are placed on this state of Oregon inventory list as a result. I mean, to me, that seems like a useful thing.
Well, Charles, you're rewriting that policy. That policy was written, was just explained by Ian, I think, that this policy was written in 1980 specific to the 8 items that citizen advisory group was recommending. And it was giving them 2 years to get the work done on those 8 items. So I think the policy, the ideas in the policy are good, but I think it needs to be, that specific historical piece needs to be taken out because that's 40 years ago.
So how would you propose rewording it?
I would put a period after sites and buildings and just delete identified by the CAC. And I would delete the last sentence about 2 years.
If such a motion, I second it.
Well, I guess the only problem I have with that is, as I said, I think as long as there's a mechanism for the various CACs to propose new items and there's a commitment from the county to evaluate those new items in consultation with SHPO and the Historical Society, and using the enumerated tools in the ordinance for the significance of, or determining the significance of the item. I guess I'm fine, but I had interpreted this policy to be a commitment from the county to take action on new historic and cultural resources proposed by the CAC.
Well, I'm just trying to have it, new cultural resources proposed by anybody is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, it makes sense because we have right now, we have citizens advisory committees representing all of the different parts of the county, but you'll recall it wasn't very long ago that Arch Cape was the only one that had a citizens advisory committee. So if we leave citizens advisory committee language in there, we will limit the effectiveness of this to just those parts of the county that have one. Whereas if we do it the way Linda's saying, anyone could make the recommendation. That might be too broad, but anyway, that's what it would say.
Well, certainly if it said that, I would agree with you. But absent the words, that stand in place of anybody. It doesn't say who could make a proposal and whether or not the county would pay any attention to them. Other
Okay,
than, go ahead.
here's an alternative. We can leave the identified by a citizens advisory committee or a member of the public.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
How about that?
Yeah, no, I'm fine with that.
You know, I just think we don't know anything about most of these resources, and there can be good resources out there that have a champion, and I don't want them not to get their chance because the policy is written too narrowly.
Right.
Yeah, so I would support that modification that Linda just made.
So I've got that up on the share screen. Does that look correct to everybody?
Yeah, that seems good.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
it
a
works for me.
small change, but it kind of brings it into the current rather than the long ago past.
Chris, you okay with that?
Looks good. Yep.
All right, good. Sounds unanimous to me. Okay, so cultural resources policies, policy 1. I think that other than my earlier comment about broaden it to be inclusive of all the Indian tribes, it looks fine to me.
Fine to me.
Sure.
Yep.
You okay, Chris?
Yep.
All right,
Yep.
good. So policy 2, you know, again, it looks fine other than, you know, my same concern here is as long as it includes all the tribes, I'm happy with it.
Yeah, I agree. Leave it.
Is Indian the term we're using or no?
You know, God only knows, but I've retreated into my cave and I use the word tribe now. And even then, I suppose I've got my shields up in case somebody hurls something at me, but that's what I mean is Indian tribes.
Is Native American now out of favor?
I have no earthly idea.
We might check with the members of the Chinook tribe and ask what they prefer.
Yeah, good idea.
What they prefer today.
Well,
That's all we can go by.
Yeah, back to Mary Jo's comment that I think is salient. I'm a little bit nervous just asking the Chinook Nation representative because, you know, for all I know, perhaps he believes he represents all tribes, but could be that there are tribes that don't agree with that. I don't know. I'm just a little nervous about presuming that if you say that it's an Indian tribal burial site, that by definition means it's Chinook. I don't know. And I wouldn't want to be restrictive in setting a policy. I'd rather be as inclusive as I know how to be at the moment.
What language would you substitute, Charles?
No, I would just leave policy 2 the way it is. And I mean, fine, the Classic Plains CAC who apparently has a representative from the Chinook Nation on their CAC. So they've made a recommendation. Whether that recommendation actually makes it into the end product, that's presented to the Board of Commissioners for final approval, I don't know. But from our committee's standpoint, I would just like the record to reflect that our committee wants it to be totally inclusive of all tribes.
Well, you're creating, I don't know if you're creating a false issue or not. I thought the Chinook were the tribe that lived in Clatsop County. So I don't know the answer to that. But by not being specific, it's very difficult for anybody to check with someone. You can check with the State Historic Preservation Office, and you can check with a specific named tribe, but it would be like saying you have to check with women before you can do this. That doesn't get us anywhere, because who are you going to ask?
Mhm.
Well, I hear what you're saying, Linda, but as Mary Jo pointed out, there is another tribe, the Nehalem, and I forgot the other end of the hyphen, but it was a Nehalem.
Clatsop.
Clatsop, thank you.
The
Nehalem
one that the
Clatsop.
county's named after, that
Yeah.
there are still members, or there are still people who are descended from the Clatsop who live in Clatsop County, and actually a family in Warrenton, I know. So it's actually a really, really political topic. So I don't know what a good answer is.
And I know that it was the Clatsop tribe who were populated around Cove Beach Lake. So that's why I said I would prefer for us to recommend that we be inclusive of all the tribes. And as you point out, Julia, if the Chinook Nation is saying now they represent everybody, okay, fine, but that's a political thing. I just want to make sure we're inclusive.
Well, if we know those are the only two tribes that were in our county, we could just list both of them and be done with it.
Maybe somebody from this committee should talk to somebody from the Clatsop Plains committee and see if there's really an issue here. I mean, it sounds like the whole committee agreed to this. This isn't just something that the representative of, the Chinook Nation put forth. So I think maybe I always believe in inclusivity, but maybe we're creating an issue that doesn't exist. Maybe, Charles, maybe you could call and talk to the chair of that committee.
I could do it because I deal with him in the overall committee.
True.
Okay, I think that would be great. And meantime, I will maybe get this information from Mary Jo and contact somebody in the Nehalem Clatsop to see if they feel like they have sites here in our county that should be preserved that they don't think would be if we limit it to Chinook. Again, I'm not trying to create problems. I'm trying to avoid them.
Charles, you're correct, and I'm looking up that information, and we'll be sending it to you soon.
Okay, thanks. All right, any other comments? I mean, we're kind of at the end of our time, but
I had a comment. May I, Charles?
Of course, sure.
The documents that we were sent included the Restore Oregon pamphlet, and in that pamphlet it spoke of local preservation ordinance and that each community needed to have one. And looking at the list, I didn't see Astoria or Clatsop County as having one. Do we have a local preservation ordinance, Ian, in the county?
Don't believe so. We have some standards for protection of specific historic sites, and we have some standards for protection of archaeological sites, but we do not have any kind of comprehensive set of standards for historic sites.
It says in this document, this is on, I don't know, page number, they're not numbered, but anyway, it says, without local preservation ordinance, even properties on the National Register are not protected from demolition. Do you know anything about that?
I do not. Julia, do you have any more information on that?
I do not.
It seems significant. If we're trying to protect things and we're not doing it.
Well, I did read in the administrative rules, I believe, that putting it on the list just requires that the county review demolitions and not, it didn't say it could stop them. It just said they had to be reviewed.
Yeah.
I don't like.
I think a preservation ordinance would basically create a process for that to review proposed demolitions or alterations. So looking at the last page of the packet here, it was a suggestion, I believe, that the Historical Society made, or sorry, it was the Lower Columbia Preservation Society, made a recommendation that the county adopt a preservation ordinance.
I agree. That's the point.
Yeah, if there isn't one, I agree.
As do I. So maybe we should say that the recommendation from our committee is for the county to adopt a preservation ordinance.
I second.
Yes.
Agree?
Chris? Okay, good. So everybody agrees.
And that would be for sites that have made it onto the list.
Yeah, that's the way I interpret it.
Right. And then I had one more, if I may, Charles. I'm sorry to extend things, but in the National Trust for Historical Preservation, it states this is information we got from the county. It states the three imperatives that they have for preservation, to take action to preserve sites or buildings or whatever. And they are climate change, that is protected against climate change, economic imperative, which just has to do that economics, and equity imperative. But it doesn't say anything about what we have to be concerned about is geologic imperative. We have to be able to protect our sites from Richter 9 earthquakes and tsunamis. And I'd like to see somebody address that, and if that shouldn't be included, at least in our county, along the coast, actually. Do you all see where you see where what I'm talking about?
I don't, but it sure makes a lot of sense.
Let's see if I can get this in front of the camera. This is the document right here.
Hang on, I gotta scroll over. Okay.
And you might remember it because it had these great big letters in the,
Oh, yeah.
in the back. Okay. So anyway,
so it seems like it seems like we could be specific about having those points included in our recommendation that the county adopt a preservation ordinance, including, what you just said.
Okay, yeah, National Historic Preservation imperatives with the addition of the earthquake and tsunami.
Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yep.
Okay, good. Great, thanks, Todd.
Gotcha.
All right, so I don't think there were any more. I think that was the end of the policy document. I think I copied all those off. So if there's no other comments from the committee members, we could move into public comment.
Fine with me.
No comment from my side. Thank you very much.
This is Nancy Chase. I had a question.
Okay.
Where is Cove Beach Lake?
It's at the north end of Cove Beach, just behind what used to be Wanda Stefanides' house, and just south of what used to be Cornwall's house.
So are those I think of them as the wetlands in front of your house? Is that the same thing?
No, there's actually a body of water there that was historically called Cove Beach Lake, that people used to fish in back in the day, long before I got here. So Ian's got it on the screen.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's first of all, I think the work you're doing is really important, and I'm particularly think Hug Point is one of my favorite places, so I'm glad that's on your list. On Cove Beach Lake, is that owned by the state or is it in separate ownership? I'm just wondering about, what the impact will this be on whoever does own it?
A good portion of it is in the hands of the Wetlands Conservancy, and there's another piece of it that is in private ownership. But again, those are details that I get addressed, I think, as we wend our way through the process, if we decide that we want to pursue adding this to the list.
Okay, and it sounds like archaeological, importance is a possibility here. Is that verified through the State Historic Preservation Office or other means, or is that just a, kind of a traditional oral history?
I don't know if it is under SHPO. The location of a lot of those Indian sites are kept confidential, so I haven't reviewed them myself. But again, my assumption is we'll figure that out as we work through the process.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
All right.
Mary Jo, did you have anything? I think you're the only other one.
Nope, I haven't attended these meetings before, and I've wanted to, and I was just here to listen in, and that was it. No questions.
Great, thank you for coming.
All right, great. So next time we'll be looking at groundwater and watersheds. Hopefully next time this will be a fairly short meeting because I think we've covered both of those in our last meeting. So, I suppose I'd ask people to kind of review what we've done, and if anybody wants to add anything or bring anything new forward in October, that would be a great time to do it. Otherwise, what I saw some feedback from various committee members that they would be in favor of shortening the meeting rather than, leaping ahead to to tackle advanced topics. So it sounds like that's what we'll do. We'll just focus on the topics as they come, and if we've already dealt with it, we'll have a short meeting. Anybody have any comments about that?
Sounds good.
Well, I agree with that. I am feeling like because we devoted our time to looking at the existing policies in the comprehensive plan about today's subject, that we really didn't get to the question of what additional things should be in the plan, what sort of aspirational things. At the end here, Todd brought up a really excellent one, and we got to a little bit, but I would be willing to try to draft a few if we had permission to take this up again for at the beginning of the next meeting. I'd put them in writing and circulate them in advance so that we didn't have to take a lot of time. But, you know, kind of just the more general things that are in the materials that we've been provided, and that, in my view, should be in the comprehensive plan, our aspirational goals. What do you think?
No, I think that would be great. I don't personally, I don't have a problem with it, as long as the planning folks don't.
It sounds good to me too.
Yeah, thanks, Linda.
Works
Yeah.
for us.
Okay, perfect.
I'd like to make a closing point. First, I'd like to thank Linda and Charles for being so much on top of topics. This whole thing would collapse without the two of you. And then, Ian, your use of this share screen is wonderful. And I find that these online meetings are far superior to the ones we have when we're sitting around a table and fumbling over paper. So thank you all.
Thanks, Todd. I would add briefly before we close regarding the next meeting. Again, as Charles said, the topic will be groundwater and watersheds, and then we'll have wildlife habitat coming up in November. We are still working on planning a workshop ahead of your October meeting. So right now we have October 1st on the calendar. The time is still to be determined, but will likely be either 3 to 5 or 4 to 6. And we'll bring in a speaker or two to discuss watersheds and groundwater. And so we're working with folks from the watershed associations. And so that will be October 1st. And then your next meeting, your next regular meeting will be October 14th, which is the second Wednesday at 10 a.m. And all meetings, again, will continue to be virtual. So keep an eye out for information about the workshop. We will send all of the CAC members the invitation link to access the meeting once everything is finalized.
Great. And you know, to the extent that you can get somebody there from the North Coast Watershed Association or the Cola Creek Watershed Council, I think it would be great to hear from some of those groups. I know a lot of what we have heard in the past, which has been really good, and I appreciated those workshops, was from state agencies like ODF or DSL or other state agencies, but certainly hearing from the Watershed Association or the Watershed Councils would be great.
Yes, I believe we're working with the North Coast Watershed Association, and then I'm not sure who else. So we should get to hear a more local perspective.
Perfect.
Good.
Alrighty, I'd move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Good
everyone.
luck,
Take care.
Chris.
Thanks, Charles.
Chris, good
Yeah,
luck.
good luck, Chris.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Linda.
everyone.
I'm sure you'll make all those guests happy again.
All right,
Take
everybody.
care, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.